Welcome to the debate.
And welcome to Next Game Playbook. This is the podcast where strategies, big ideas, and insights come together to help creators, innovators, and founders succeed in their next big move.
I'm your dissenter for today.
And I'm the advocate. We're glad you're joining us. Before we jump into today's topic, just a quick reminder, if you like what you hear, please do like, share, and subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen.
Yeah, absolutely. And head over to nextgameplaybook.com to check out the source article for today's discussion. Leave a comment with your thoughts. Maybe subscribe to the newsletter while you're there. We'd appreciate it. Definitely. Okay, so today we're digging into something based on a recent piece on the site. It's this real tension, something leaders, innovators, anyone making tough calls really runs into. It's that conflict between, external wisdom, the objective analysis, the expert advice, and that quiet, sometimes nagging internal feeling, your gut, your intuition.
Right. And it really brings up a fundamental question, especially in high-stakes situations where the context is, unique and complex. Where should the ultimate reliance be? Where's the final filter?
Exactly. So should we prioritize that cultivated intuition? And we're defining that here as subconscious pattern recognition rooted in deep personal experience. Or should we lean on the rigorous evaluation of external expertise and objective analysis first and foremost?
That's the core of it.
My position is, I think, pretty straightforward. I'm arguing for the primacy of self-trust. Intuition, when it's properly honed, acts as the ultimate compass. Now, external guidance? Indispensable. It's crucial input. But the accountability for a choice, that rests solely with the individual. And because of that, their own uniquely calibrated internal database, it has to take precedence as the final deciding filter.
And my stance is that the rigorous evaluation of external expertise must be the initial and most reliable filter, always. Relying purely on an internal feeling, without subjecting it first to critical, objective scrutiny, frankly, I think it's fundamentally too risky. Complexity demands anchored logic first. Gut feeling, that comes later, if at all.
Okay, so to really get into this, we need to be clear about what we mean by intuition. It's not, some kind of magic. It's highly personalized automatic pattern recognition. It comes directly from a lifetime of accumulated data, your data. The individual who's actually operating in their specific environment, they are almost by definition the ultimate expert on their unique context. That inner sense, it's processing subtle cues, risks, social dynamics, things that no outside consultant, no matter how credentialed, can fully access or even model accurately. Processing, we actually erode the integrity of our own inner knowing. And look, there's practical evidence for this. Studies consistently show 80 to 85% of CEOs, seasoned leaders, they rely on their intuition for their biggest, most critical decisions. Now, this isn't usually their starting point, I'll grant you, but it often acts as the final check, the final veto. It suggests that the most successful professionals, they treat expertise as valuable data, absolutely, but their personal synthesis of that data, their intuition, that becomes the necessary ultimate filter.
Okay, that's a compelling figure, the CEO reliance. I hear that. But I think I'd frame its role a bit differently. The fact that, as you say, senior leaders often use it as a final filter, that often means they're applying it to a set of options that have already been pre-vetted using objective analysis. The real issue, as I see it, is that subconscious pattern recognition, however rapid it might be, is just deeply susceptible to confusion. It gets mixed up with impulse reactions, Things fueled by immediate fear, stress, or sometimes just wishful thinking. That internal data crunching, it's noisy. And this internal noise, it has to be checked.
Okay.
We must apply objective expertise critically because, look at history. Even widely accepted best practices. Think about the decades we spent pushing low-fat, high-carb diets, right? Or financial models that completely ignored systemic risk that were later debunked, massively so. This just shows that external advice, the supposed gold standard, can be tragically wrong, often because it's overgeneralized or it's working with lagging information. So the crucial first step isn't just trusting the gut reaction to the advice. It's applying rigorous critical thinking to unmask both the external guru, so to speak, and the internal impulse.
You're raising a really foundational point there. And I think it moves us right into the core of the debate. If we agree that intuition needs to be, let's say, cultivated, how can a leader reliably tell the difference? How do you distinguish that genuine, quiet whisper of knowing from the anxious noise of impulse, especially when you're under intense pressure?
Precisely. And the source material itself makes this distinction, right? It says true intuition arrives calmly. Impulse, on the other hand, is fueled by anxiety and stress. Now, I'm just not convinced that this distinction is easily made in the heat of the moment in real time. I mean, think about it. A company facing an immediate liquidity crisis, a surgeon dealing with a patient whose status is rapidly deteriorating. The pressure is immense. Are you seriously suggesting that the leader should, pause for some focused breathing or whip out their journal before making a time-critical, extremely high-stakes decision? Doesn't the sheer, overwhelming pressure of that moment almost mandate that objective, validated, external protocols and data become the safer, more responsible default option?
That's a fair challenge regarding time criticality. But I think it slightly misunderstands how informed intuition operates in high-performance environments. We're not talking about, pausing for a meditation retreat mid-crisis. We're talking about creating a calibrated internal database over time, before the crisis. The ability to distinguish that silent whisper from the knee-jerk emotion, that's trained long before the pressure hits. Techniques like structured journaling, post-decision reviews, really asking why an initial feeling led to success or failure, that builds a crucial feedback loop.
Okay, a feedback loop.
Yeah, and this loop teaches the mind to quickly recognize the signature, the feel, of true pattern recognition versus just generalized anxiety. Think of like a master chef tasting a sauce. They instantly know what's missing, not because they stopped to journal about it, right? But because decades of specific contextual experience have calibrated their palate. A novice, they just taste and, they feel anxiety maybe. Success builds confidence, and it makes that informed intuition faster and more reliable under duress. It turns complex analysis into almost instantaneous synthesis.
I can accept that calibration is possible. Over time, yes. But relying solely on that internal calibration, I think it creates a massive potential flaw when we consider the scope and complexity of modern problems. Which brings us maybe to our second key point, the efficacy of expertise in rapidly changing contexts. Or your metaphor, the compass versus the map.
Right. And my argument holds here. Expertise often provides the compass. The universal principles, the general direction, but it doesn't give you the detailed map for your specific journey. External experts, they're frequently working with lagging data or aggregated solutions that might not fit your unique terrain. We saw this with those financial schemes you mentioned earlier. Advisors pushed products based on historical performance, maybe generalized models, but the person actually living in that volatile market context, the one who feels that unique shift in consumer confidence or sees a localized risk nobody else has spotted, they possess the freshest, most relevant data. Their current reality might render that generalized historical map potentially obsolete, even dangerous. The value of external expertise, I'd argue, diminishes in proportion to the uniqueness and novelty of the challenge.
See, I'm sorry, but I just don't think the map metaphor works quite that way. I think it's far too dismissive of the immense value of accumulated verified knowledge. Expertise isn't just about lagging data points. It provides the foundational theory, the empirical hypothesis testing, the rigorously established frameworks that actually define entire fields of knowledge. Let's take your example of the low-fat diets again. The initial public health messaging, yes, it was based on perhaps overly generalized epidemiology, but the intuition needed to counter it effectively? That required specialized external knowledge, a deep understanding of hormone regulation, the role of specific nutrient densities, complex metabolic pathways, stuff the average person's gut feeling just doesn't have access to. Without that external, objective framework, intuition risks becoming just, isolated hunches devoid of objective logic or grounding. Relying solely on a gut feeling in fields requiring deep, specialized knowledge, like, say, engineering a bridge or diagnosing a complex neurological condition, it just massively increases the risk of catastrophic, non-recoverable failure. The map, in this sense, actually provides the safety margins, the validated stress tests, that raw intuition simply cannot.
But even foundational theory has to be challenged and reevaluated sometimes, doesn't it? If we always wait for overwhelming empirical evidence to fully validate every novel path, innovation just grinds to a halt. The real leadership challenge, I think, is often about charting a course before all the external data is in and validated. That requires trusting the integrity of your own unique position and synthesis.
The integrity of one's position. That's exactly where we need scrutiny. And that brings us, I think, neatly to the third core point, this tricky balance or tension between self-trust and self-deception. We've talked about unmasking the external guru, but we absolutely have to apply the same skepticism to the internal one.
Okay, I can see where you're going with that. Yes, the courage needed to chart your own course often means confronting both internal resistance and external expectations. And that friction, it naturally feels uncomfortable. It's supposed to.
Exactly. And that very discomfort can easily mask self-deception. Look, if individuals are easily swayed by charming, perhaps uncredentialed, external advisors, the ones offering those seductive one-size-fits-all solutions or maybe using fear tactics, isn't it logical that they're equally susceptible to their own internal biases and wishful thinking? For instance, if your internal voice offers up a deeply satisfying, simple answer to an overwhelmingly complex business problem, well, that very satisfaction might be a red flag. It could be the internal equivalent of a guru selling an easy fix. The claim that you are an expert on your own life, well, it has to be qualified. Even experts are fallible, right? They require peer review. We have to scrutinize our own internal voice, especially when it makes us feel, as the source notes, deeply uneasy or triggered. Or maybe even more dangerously, when it feels too easy, too neat. Critical thinking has to be applied internally before we can grant that gut feeling primary authority.
I absolutely agree that critical self-reflection is essential. It's non-negotiable. But I believe the true courage, and frankly, the path to genuine innovation, lies in the act of comparison. It's the process of juxtaposing one's inner feeling, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it's challenged by external advice, with that advice. That's what builds genuine self-reliance. If your rigorous analysis of external data leads you down a path that fundamentally violates your core understanding of your unique context, your lived reality, then the necessary step, however hard, might be to trust your context, trust your synthesis, stepping away from the crowd. Yes, it feels uncomfortable precisely because it risks rejection or failure. But that discomfort zone is exactly where real growth and non-incremental innovation happen. Self-trust isn't about blind arrogance. It's about the willingness to assume full accountability for a choice based on your most informed internal position, having weighed all the inputs.
That's a compelling point about the need for courage, especially in innovation. I won't deny that. But I'd frame that moment of comparison differently. For me, when you compare the internal voice against external data, the priority must initially be on objective logic and documented empirical evidence. Only after that rigorous check should you consider yielding to a subjective feeling. Essentially, the internal voice has to pass the same BS detector, pardon the term, that we apply to the external guru. If it lacks a discernible logic, if you can't trace it back to some pattern or experience, however subconscious, then it really needs to be treated as potential impulse, not reliable wisdom. That objective rigor, for me, provides the only reliable mechanism for moving safely from a hunch to a validated insight.
The theory, the safety net of accumulated knowledge, absolutely. The ultimate accountability and therefore the final decision power rests with the individual. They're the ones who possess the freshest, most localized data about their specific situation. And because of that, self-trust and that cultivated intuition must take precedence as the final synthesizing mechanism, especially when facing decisions truly unique to one's context. Let the experts inform the framework, yes, but the individual must, at the end of the day, take the wheel.
And I'll reiterate my stance. The sheer complexity inherent in most significant modern decisions necessitates using critical thinking to vet both the external expert and the internal voice with, frankly, equal skepticism. Complexity demands multiple, objective perspectives. Critical logic and a relentless scrutiny of evidence must be maintained as the essential mechanism for blending intuition and logic safely. We have to remain vigilant against impulse and self-deception masquerading as informed wisdom. Objective rigor first.
It seems this constant tension, this dance between validated external wisdom and that uniquely calibrated internal knowing. Well, that really is the art of high-stakes decision-making, isn't it?
That truly is. And it's a tension we encourage all our listeners to continue exploring how you distinguish that inner knowing from the external noise in your own work, your own projects, your own material. Remember, Next Game Playbook releases new episodes regularly, exploring strategies and insights for creators and innovators.
That's right. So thank you for joining us today on The Debate here on Next Game Playbook. We hope this gave you something to think about. Until next time.